and welcome to our series of the Sustainable Table. Today I wanted to chat with you a little bit about your pantry. It's an old-fashioned word. It's a word that you don't use or hear that often, but truly it's something that lives in every kitchen. In an apartment, any kind of living space, there's always a special location where we have foods that we can go and grab and open and eat, or heat up and eat. That is sort of a pantry, a dry pantry. What we will go over today is basically understanding with time everything changes. Even something as easy as a pantry has reinvented itself because people continue to change and evolve because of the demands of time. So today I want to introduce the 3 pantries that live in your home. One is your dry cupboard, which could be just a single shelf that you designate where you put a jar of raisins or some salt. It's a place where you have some sort of goods that you go. It's a staple in your kitchen. The other is what we put in our freezer, because we often just go to the freezer, defrost, and then we heat and eat. And the third one is your kitchen refrigerator. The refrigerator has become the newest, I think, because we tend to store things in our fridge. We buy fruit, we put it in the fridge. We buy vegetables, we put it in the fridge. And we may not buy a tremendous amount, but whatever vegetable we do buy, we have to put it somewhere. It needs a designated space. Eggs, for instance, cheese, toppings, condiments. It all has to go to a destination, from the supermarket or for where you purchase your food. It has to go somewhere. And where it lands, it becomes your pantry. So those are the 3 things that we'll explore: the dry cupboard, your freezer, and then the refrigerator. And that is basically the concept of the show today. We will first do a little bit of cooking, of course, because that's my favorite part. And then, and we're going to have some friends join me. A couple of my friends are going to come in, and we're going to preserve some tomatoes for the pantry. We're going to prepare some seasoned breadcrumbs, seasoned flour, so flour that you can use when you're making chicken or a batter, so that it's easy to assemble. But because my friends are coming, I want to make them just some little things to kind of eat and treat themselves while they're helping me get these pantry items organized. So I'm going to begin with 2 easy applications. One of the things that I love to prepare for friends, especially during the summer, is watermelon. We take that for granted because a lot of people just take the watermelon, cut it, and put it on a plate. The first thing that I like to do, which is a little bit off the beaten path, is I like to take the skin and leave a little bit of the white membrane. In Sicily, noted for its watermelon rind, it's a confit, and they make a preserve with it. Here we don't, because the rind is very thin, but rinds in European melons are very thick. And so the women in the town, they're very, very resourceful, have figured out how to make a gorgeous jam. It's actually a conserve with the rind. This rind would not work, but nothing goes to waste in foreign countries. Everything is put into a secondary use. So in an effort to make more of the flavor of the watermelon, what I do is I use a lot of lemon, a lot of citrus during the summer. And why is because the lemon helps bring the flavor out. It just has a very refreshing flavor to it. And so you can put as little or as much as you want. And I'm wondering that my friends will like it. I hope they do. Just putting a little bit of effort to make sure that they know how much I appreciate them. Okay? That. Another thing that I do is I will take, these are serrated, and just do some slices. Believe it or not, a lot of the flavor will come through, even if it's just a wedge. I'm gonna let it, close it, let it stay, and when they come, that is gonna be a special treat for them. The other treat that I have for them is we're going to, again, using lemon, I want to, just as a simple Boston lettuce with a little romaine, cherry tomatoes, the golden and the reds, and I'm going to show you the versatility of honey. Instead of incorporating honey, because honey, when it's blended, it kind of emulsifies, but I want to really taste the flavor of the honey versus a vinaigrette, and I have a way that I prepare it, which I'm going to show you. So now we're going to make a very simple, and I mean simple, salad dressing with literally 3 ingredients: lemon juice, good infused olive oil, and honey. You can add a vinegar, but honestly, if you just use the lemon juice, a local honey, and infused olive oil, it really has all of the profiles that you want for to really bring out the freshness of the vegetables, the tomatoes and the lettuce. You know, I always keep things very simple because I want you to taste the food that you're trying to enjoy, especially when things are seasonal. This lettuce was fresh picked from my good friends at Silverbrook Farm, and the idea is that JJ, you know, he grows his produce with so much integrity that I'm trying to respect it by not camouflaging it with and dousing it with all of these, you know, complicated dressings. So when you're eating local food, think about the simplistic way that you can enjoy it and taste the actual food. I mean, you can taste the food if you lightly coat it, not so much immerse it in a dressing. Okay, so this is how simple this is. We are going to take the juice of 1 lemon, and don't worry if the pits are in there. I know you're not going to eat it. Just let it stay in there. So the juice of 1 lemon. And you know how I like to eyeball things? Well, this is the same. We're gonna kind of eyeball the oil amount, and I would say maybe 2 tablespoons went into that. I'm going to add just a couple of round circles of honey, and I'm just doing a light whisk. And you can see how it looks like it's thick and milky. That's called an emulsion. And I'm going to toss it. Gently. Okay, there's no salt, it doesn't need it. I'm only doing a light coating. And now here's my little special tip. Take your honey and drizzle it. It changes everything about your salad. Toss it again. Okay, toss it again. Look at this from Pampered Chef. My friend gave it to me. I thought that was so cool. So when I go to plate, make sure I get those yummy cucumbers, the tomatoes, and then I take my honey and drizzle it again. I promise you, this is going to make your friend feel special. So we have the yummy watermelon that has just a little bit of lemon, which really gives it a fresh bloom flavor. And then you have this yummy salad. We'll put this little guy right there. A yummy salad with using local honey, lemon juice, and good olive oil that we've infused. And there you have it. We are still working with the pantry piece that is dry. Things that we would use that are shelf stable. We've talked about preserving your favorite dried fruit, apricot, cranberries, raisins, currants. All of your dried fruits can be procured and kind of infused with all of your little bits of liquor, whiskey. I suggest using a good brandy, and they are wonderful gifts to make for the holidays, gifts from your heart, gifts from your time, because time is something that everybody really respects today because we're all so very busy. So that is part of what would sit on your shelf, and you have lots of time because you could do things much early like October and then use them for November, December, January, whenever you're going to be doing a lot of baking. If you're using and you're required to use raisins or dried fruits, that's a great way to make sure that you have it and it's shelf stable. We're moving on to herbs because we can always buy herbs, and this is for instance, this is oregano that comes from Italy, and you just go like this on your favorite food and it gives you these little leaves. But you know, we grow lots of herbs here locally, and this, when you hear this crunch, can you get that noise? When you hear that crunch, that herb is telling you, I'm ready, okay? It starts out, oregano starts out looking like this, and by the time it dries, it looks like this. It is the easiest way of making herbs. All you do is take your herbs, and this is hanging with just some elastic. You can actually hang it, or I simply used a basket with a towel on the bottom, paper towel, and it'll continue to absorb. And I just let it sit on my counter for maybe 2 weeks, and I just moved it around every now and then. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to do it right here in front of you. I'm going to go like this, and I'm going to continue to shake the leaves off. And what I will get is a beautiful leaves just like this. It's just a natural herb, and this is all oregano. And I'll have a whole jar, and all winter long, if I'm cooking and I need to use oregano, I have my own homemade oregano. Herbs that I've grown, we've dried and put in a jar. The other thing I want to encourage you is glass. It's such a great product to have. So I recycle my jars as much as I possibly can. I use them for food savers. If instead of using a plastic container, I will use a glass jar. I just put it in the fridge, take it out, and it's something I can use over and over again. So I just, you know, recycle and use as many of my jars as glass jars as possible. Another favorite herb that I particularly like, and this I do for myself, is mint. Fresh mint starts out like this. And mint is so easy to, you know, and it comes up every year. It's such an easy herb to grow. And I just lay it flat again. I just use the cookie sheet on paper towel and I let it dry. And every now and then I would turn them like this. And what I got was this beautiful dry, and you can hear the noise, okay? She's done. And then I just take the mint. I use the stem, and you know that I preserve my I make the mother for the vinegar peppers, so I use the stem. I save the stems because I'm going to use them when I put up my vinegar peppers, and that I do like the very end of September. So the stems get reused. I simply go like this to the mint, and then I get a beautiful, see these leaves here at the bottom? I take them, I crumble them a little more, put them in a jar, and all year long I have fresh mint, and it's wonderful. If I want to infuse oil, if I want something with mint, I take some of this mint. The power of flavor that is in these fresh herbs that I've personally dried is so much different than what you could buy in a store. So I encourage you to try it. It's the simplest method of preserving herbs. Drying them and putting them in a jar, and you have the best flavor all year long. When you go to parsley, parsley is one of those tough herbs. You know, you can freeze it, you can chop it, mince it, and put it in your freezer. I recommend doing that. But if you have parsley now and you want to save it, here's a little trick. Again, I encourage you to recycle containers, and what I have here is I have layers of basil on top and my parsley. This parsley, believe it or not, is 1 month that I've been holding it with just a cloth. 1 month in the freezer, in the refrigerator. And I know that there's some yellow parts. That's fine, I can discard it. But this parsley is still good for me to use, and I've kept it. This is fresh picked for my garden, and I was able to hold on to it for 1 month. This was just picked yesterday from my friends at Silverbrook, and it's a heartier Italian flat parsley. It's almost like eating a little bit of celery. It's very, very flavorful. And this is your another version of Italian parsley, and it's very mild. And I'm just trying to introduce ways to hold on to your vegetables and your herbs so that they last longer for you to incorporate into your foods. So 1 month and it looks pretty good. Basil, we're going to talk about that. And when we come back, I'm going to have my friends help me on and show you how to preserve basil that can last for months and months and months in your refrigerator. You know, basil is one of those ingredients that it's synonymous with anything that you think of Italian food, but it's used in a lot of the Vietnamese foods and a lot of the Thai foods. They use a ton of basil in their recipe. And I'm always curious to talk to people about, you know, how do we preserve basil? Because the one thing that happens is that it oxidizes and it goes from a beautiful leaf of green to this black. And I know that the rule of thumb is to take the basil, wash it, dry it, and layer it in between paper towels and put it in your freezer. And Jean, when you do that, what does it taste like?
I've never done it.
You've never done it?
I've only done it with pesto and frozen pesto.
And what do you like the flavor?
Yes.
It stays,
fine.
right?
Yes, it does.
It stays green.
If it's in the form of pesto.
If it's in the form of pesto, because you've added oil
Yes,
to it and
nuts.
lemon juice and nuts, and,
Yes.
and it becomes part of like a food product.
Exactly.
Now, Carolyn, when you've done it the old way, because I know
I have tried it, and it gets mushy, and it loses its flavor, has no flavor.
right, and it almost tastes like that licorice anise flavor, and it really takes away the whole profile of what basil was supposed to taste like, right?
This way it'll be too salty.
It will not be salty.
No?
So no. So what we're doing today is I want you to keep the green for as long as possible in your leaf. I do not want you to put it in your freezer, and I do not want you to end up with something black like this. It's just too much to bear when it's such an easy solution. And where did I learn my solution? You know, everywhere I go, I talk to people. I'm always interested about how to, what is an improved way to cook a recipe, if there's any way that I can learn. So I'm constantly speaking. And one time I was sitting somewhere, and this woman we were just talking food and pizza and just all this stuff. And then the topic of basil came up. And this is what she came up with, and how someone told her, so she felt really comfortable telling me. Look at this basil. Just look at it. Smell it. Can you smell the basil? I know that the color has oxidized, but
That's what we do now.
that's what you're doing now. How old do you think that basil is? Like, how long do you think it's been like that?
1 year, 2 years?
1 year.
1 year.
Wow.
Right. Now, I know that the color might look a little bit like this, but I can tell you that the flavor is as honest as the green leaf. I don't have any more currant because I'm just starting to do my preserved basil. And what my friends here are doing, and what I would like you to do at home, is to simply take kosher, the coarse salt, and pick your green leaves of your basil. Do not wash it. And then and just keep doing a layer of basil and a layer of salt. Just like this. And you compact it just like Carolyn. Can I see yours? You see what Carolyn has here? That's exactly what it's supposed to be. You're compacting, it's very tight. And now you did this with me last year. And how long did it last?
I still have
You
some,
still have it.
And mine is green.
See?
It didn't even turn black.
Right, and it's because of the salt. You know, I don't advise to do a jar like this, but I did this because I'm constantly testing so that I can share my information with my friends. But if you make them small, I tell you, this makes, if you're an herb grower and you have an herb garden, this makes a great gift, but it's also something that you can have for your own use all year long. The thickest layer is the salt, just like what Carolyn is doing. That's it, you're done. That's done. And you're going to close it, put a cap on it, put it in your refrigerator, and that basil is going to stay green at least, I promise you, at least three if not 4 months. And that's it. and you're preserving your basil. You can do the same thing with rosemary, okay? Now, there's different types of rosemary. You cannot do it with sage. I have not tried it with sage. I've tried it with rosemary. I do the same thing. If this rosemary, you can either put it in a jar that's tall with a lot of salt, just like this, and it just stays and it just sits. And this is also some thyme. Because it's a dry herb, and then just fill it with salt. And then when you need it, just pick the leaf out and you get to use it. And it's amazing because it's one of those things that you can actually pick the leaf and it will maybe change a little bit in color, but you will have beautiful fresh herbs.
Do you have to fill the jar all the way
Fill
up?
it up all the way up.
So it's covering the leaves.
Correct. The only difference between the other preserves that we've talked about is this does need to go in the refrigerator. It does need to go in your refrigerator, okay? But I promise you, it's such a great secret that was shared to me, and I'm so happy that I can share it with you at home. So you can take your fresh herbs. If you are an herb grower and you are successful, look at your herbs again and know that you can enjoy them naturally or dried, and the basil, of course, in the salt, which is your natural preservative. Take out the stick and then enjoy it with your cooking recipe. That's a wrap. One of the ways that I decide how and what I will make to put into my pantry or what I'm going to preserve is really based on what my family eats, what I make for them, how, just how we eat as a repertoire on a week-to-week basis. I know, for instance, that some things need preserving time, because they need to really bloom into a flavor. So when I start to think about what I put in my own pantry, one of the things that I have to have, because I make raisin cookies, I make this, and I've showed you this before, where I make this Christmas cake for my husband. And it really requires me to really think about it, because if I don't prepare the drunken raisins and the spirited currants, and if I don't prepare them a few months ahead of time, when it's time for me to make this, traditional Christmas cake that we have every year, it just won't come out the same. So I really have to think hard about what I'm going to be making, especially for the holidays, because those are really important times when I want traditions to be alive and well. So that is how I begin to think about what I need to replenish into my pantry. So I'm going to share this little secret with you. In order to make spirited or drunken raisins, you start out with raisins that are just like this. You can buy them in a medley, you can buy them individually, you can, any kind of dried raisin. And all you do is put them in a jar. And you know how you have liquor that has a little bit, and it has this big bottle, and so I want to get rid of that. So all year long I have a jar, and I keep adding these little bits of liquors and whiskey and brandy that I kind of have left over. And when comes July, I think about, I'm going to have to make these raisins, because November is when I make the cake. So I need a couple of months for it to kind of season and bloom. And all I do is take and put my collected brandy into the raisins. And I really, want you to try this, because it really is special when you go to use this. Now, if I'm making a raisin cookie, which is also another favorite cookie that I make for my family, I will take these raisins, simply let them stay out, and that liqueur that I've blended, I can keep adding raisins to. So if I take, I'm not using these, I'm not going to waste them, I'm just going to put them right in. See? I'm going to take that. You could see that dark, beautiful amber color. it just smells so sweet. And the sugar in the raisin and the sugar in the brandies and the liqueurs, and it doesn't really matter what I'm using, it's just for the flavor. It is so incredible. And then when I go to bake with them, that little bit of liqueur permeates into the dough, and I'm getting a special profile of the cookies and in this cake that I make every single year. The other thing is, if you just wanted to use, these are just currants, the same thing. I only put currants in here because I use this for another special cookie that I make. So when I'm thinking about how I will put different things into my pantry, this is what helps me decide what will I make for my family and what are the traditional foods that I want to have during once or 3 or 4 times during the course of the year. When I start to do this, I know that I'm replenishing the pantry and I am getting ready to stock my, just all of the special preserves that I do in the summer. In addition to the spirited raisins, and again, you can do these are just raisins and currants. They're small, you can see the 2. And I only have that. And this one is where I have the medley of raisins. They're extra large. And I have particular foods that I make with this concoction. But the other fruits, the dry fruits that I infuse is apricots. And I use apricots in a lot of cooking, especially when I'm either making a sauce or I'm making apricot cookies, or if I want to add something, especially with veal and pork, I do a lot with apricots. So all I do is take the dry apricots that I buy at a local store and infuse it, just put in really good brandy. I don't use whiskey with this, I use a brandy. But what I want to show you is that when I had started to put these in, the jar was filled to the top layer, and you could see how they've absorbed it, the liquor. And what you want to do is you want to check your pantry and keep adding to it, so that they stay, so that there's enough liquid always on top, just like this. I have to make sure that all of the fruit is covered with the liquor. Same thing with all of them. Okay, it's okay to leave some airspace, but as long as it covers the fruit. And then I go in periodically and check it out. Something new that I've tried this year, because I'm always thinking out of the box, I'm always looking for new ways to incorporate color and flavor into the foods that I make. And so this year I started to do cranberries, because it's such an important ingredient in so many foods, especially if I'm making oatmeal cookies, and if I'm just trying to increase the flavors, because I'm looking for that burst of flavor that I can make my food be much more distinctive. So cranberries are so popular, and they're produced here in New England, so why not? So what I did was purchase some already pre-dried cranberries, and I just infused it with a liquor, and these take much less time to be infused. It's a softer fruit, unlike the apricot or the raisin, which is a harder fruit. So you could do an infused cranberry relatively within a month, and you would be okay to use it. So it's a softer fruit, so it takes less time. A hard-skinned fruit takes longer to be infused. It's simple science. You take this and push it down with the back of your spoon.
Okay,
So
got it.
here, this one has a hole. Why don't you switch off with me? Yes. Okay. So can you see it? So why don't you take a couple of tomatoes and get them ready like this. And then in between the layers, you're going to put a little bit of basil leaf, which is right there.
Oh, you lemonade there, yeah? The lemonade there. Do you lemonade anything?
Yeah, you can take that off. I didn't, but it's okay.
Getting that, Jason? Getting it? So you put some of the tomato chunks, real quick and simple. This is one of the first tomato recipes I taught my girls to do. It was one of the first things. Now, if you want to put a little salt, go ahead. Put a little bit of basil, right? right in the middle. And then I'm going to start adding more tomatoes. Again, compress the tomatoes, dice them up. And you will be able to taste
A little bit.
summer. You're right, put a little bit, pack it down, okay? A little basil, a little salt. You guys have salt? Good. I'm gonna keep doing the tomatoes. How's it going?
Good.
You're doing good? And you are canning right now. You're canning tomatoes. And you know, I'm looking for snowstorms because if we get a snowstorm and I want to make a nice pizza, I take out one of these jars with this type of sauce called pacatelle, which means it's packed in little packs, and I can have the best fresh tomato sauce for my pizza. Or if I'm going to make a stew, same thing. The only thing is that it takes a little time. So you know, you have a wooden spoon and you're going to get some juice because you're pressing down. See this juice? We don't want that. So I'm going to take that juice and I'm going to empty it. Okay? And I'm going to keep pressing because I want that juice out. And you see that little tomato? I'm going to keep adding another tomato, a little more basil, a little salt. You want that juice. You know that piece that lives inside the seed and the skin? It's called the tomato jelly. Use those fingers. Get that sauce out, that juice. You know, if you have a really good friend that likes to can with you, this is a great afternoon project to do with that friend. Okay? See that? There's really no room for air. Want to keep the air pockets really tight. And borrow this lid. I want to show you. You simply take this jar, okay? Wipe it. And when we come back, I'm going to show you how to give this a water bath, and this jar will be perfect for many, many, many months, even years. So this is the jar of what they call pacatelle tomatoes, and these are, I used plum tomatoes, some fresh basil, and kosher salt. And basically this is the easiest way to can a tomato in a jar. And it's simply taking your plum tomato, taking the top off, cutting it in half, quartering it into pieces, and then putting it into your sterilized jar. And layering it with a little basil, which is great color, and a little bit of salt. Salt is optional, you do not have to use salt. And you take your pieces of chopped tomato, put it into the jar, keep pressing it with the back of a wooden spoon, press it and take the water out like I just showed you. And now we're gonna put this one into a water bath, which you have to do when you're canning tomatoes. But let's say hypothetically we had lots of these jars, these pints. So I would put them all, I would begin by taking a towel on the bottom and then wrapping the jar in another towel and let them all sit in here. And then I would put my water, whoops, and you want to make sure that the water covers the top of the jar, and then just cover it, put a lid on it, and when you have a rolling boil and the water is moving, that is a rolling boil. You count from that point 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you shut off your gas, leave the lid on, and the next morning you will have to take your jar of tomato out. You'll take your lid off or the ring. They call this the ring. Take that off, otherwise it will rust and it will be difficult to take out. And I know that because a lot of times I don't, or I didn't in the past, and I would lose the jar because I'd have to break it, and you can't eat food with glass in it. So remember to take the ring off. The cap, this one of course isn't, but the cap the lid will be having suction because it's been heated and all the air is suction, and all of the components have made it become air pocket free, so the suction is in. And when you go like this, the lid doesn't come off, and you know it's right. When you put this in your pantry, check your jars. Make sure that they're okay, because sometimes the seal may be broken. It's unlikely, but it can happen that the seal is broken and it goes like this. So you want to use that tomato jar immediately or discard it because it will have an odor. Never feel bad about throwing away a product that has been, a tampered seal. It didn't seal correctly, because it's not good. So when this is sealed correctly and this doesn't pop off and it goes like this, it tells you it's perfectly sealed. This will keep in your pantry, shelf stable, couple of years. Usually a bushel of tomatoes will yield 10 to 12 quarts. So you might get 20 or 24 of these, 22 in a bushel. It's a good commodity to have in your shelf. Your pantry will thank you, your family will thank you, and the yummy freshness of summer will live in the jar when you use it. Once you do it, you'll understand the flavor, and you'll always want to make that little bit of extra effort. So today we've talked about the shelf stable of the dry pantry, which is preserving tomatoes, doing your herbs, drying, and then doing them with the salt cure in the refrigerator. We've talked about keeping apricots and raisins and currants in a liqueur that you would otherwise just have little bits of. We've talked about, why the pantry is important. I want to share one other fact with you. We've talked about the shelf stable and what we keep in the refrigerator, but we want to talk about the freezer. And in the freezer, I'm going to talk about two things in specific: flour and breadcrumbs. I know that when I need seasoned flour or seasoned breadcrumbs, I tend to stay away from a recipe like that because I have to think about all the herbs and taking everything out. So I'm always trying to think of, busy with 3 kids, I'm trying to think of ways to minimize the amount of commotion that I can cause in my own kitchen, believe it or not. So my tip for the freezer is to have pre-seasoned flour that I use for chicken and one for fish, not using the same. I like to give it its own bag, its own destination. And the same thing with my breadcrumbs. I use one that I use only for vegetables and one that I use for if I'm going to do like a fish, that stays on its own. If I'm going to do chicken, that stays in its own. But I want to give you the general method of how to season your breadcrumbs and how to season your flour. So come on back. One of the tricks that I like to have is I need to be prepared. It's so important to me to be organized in my kitchen. It's important to me that I have that pantry ready to go so that if I want to make a dish, that I can pull out components of what I'm going to make out of my dry pantry. If I need my herbs and I want them to have a power pack flavor, I can go to my fridge and I can take my fresh herbs that I've put in a salt. I can go to my pantry and get the dried oregano or whatever herb that I've dried and carefully put into a jar, and I can use all year long. But then comes the part where, the freezer, because I've talked about us having 3 different pantries in our lives. We have the refrigerator, we have the dry pantry, which is a shelf or a cupboard. It could be a single location. And then we have the freezer. And there's lots and lots and lots. We could do a whole show just on what goes into the freezer pantry, but I want to leave you with this. My two items that I always have in my freezer. And again, it depends on whether your family eats a lot of fish, a lot of chicken, a lot of pork, a lot of beef. It depends on what your family eats. But I like to have a generic batch made up, and then as I take from that batch, I label it, because I might have some leftover. So here we have flour, all-purpose flour. It's not a fancy flour, and in it I've added some paprika. And again, that is discretion, because I know that my family likes paprika. It's your family's taste buds' discretion. Learn to hear what your family likes to eat. This is onion, granulated, not powdered, but this is granulated onion. This is, I don't generally add salt, but this is a garlic salt. It's heavier. I use a little bit of black pepper, and I always put in my red pepper flakes. And that is my generic flour blend that I keep in this container. This is my base, okay, in the freezer, and it's good to go. When I take out of this and I use fish, I take whatever's left over, get a Ziploc bag, say fish flour, done. This still remains because I never know how much I'm going to use. So it's it's an easy way for me to make something without having feel like I have to take everything out, because I don't want to take out 20 spices, and the flour always gets everywhere. So this is a great little tip that I learned a long time ago. I cover it and it's gone. My other big tip for breadcrumbs is that, you can buy the packaged breadcrumbs. The problem I have with it sometimes, for what I like to do, and this is a personal choice, I'm not saying that it's not appropriate, of course it is, but for me, I like to make my own breadcrumbs and I like to grate them. That's me. That's my little gift that I give to my family, because it's a little extra effort that I have to put into it. So I take my fresh breadcrumbs, and I do this with leftover breads, that we have, or I buy, if bread is on sale, I buy it, let it dry, and then I just grate it, and this is what I get. Okay, so this is my bowl that I'm going to keep in the freezer, and then when I need to make it, for something, I pull out what I need and then leave the rest as a bank. This one, I still put my granulated onion, paprika, very similar, except there's one ingredient that I don't put in. My garlic salt and black pepper. If you want to use white pepper, go ahead, it's okay. And I blend it right in. You thought this was only for pie crust? Believe me, or for mashed potatoes. I love to reinvent uses for things. And now that has become my seasoned breadcrumbs. When I do use these, either the flour or the breadcrumbs, I always have parsley, and I will put in fresh parsley. I try not to use the dry parsley because the flavor has changed. So I do put in fresh minced parsley. Especially if I'm making chicken cutlets. It's my family's favorite, chicken cutlet parm. So this is how I keep it simple, so that I'm only dealing with the chicken, the egg batter, and then in this. And then we have this great, I'm using what I've prepared. I'm using what my family likes to eat. That's how I decide what will fit into my pantry. You need to ask your family, or what your family likes to eat, and that's what you need to put into your pantry so that it fits your needs. Everyone's pantry is unique. My pantry is different from yours, and Carolyn, your pantry is pretty stocked, I know, for a fact. Andre, your wife is constantly packing that. Jean, you with all your girls, right, and now you're a grandmother, so you've got to get that going. This is what it's about. It's about how do we fit nature and summer and the foods from summer all year long. These are just little tips of how it works into my life, and I hope that you've enjoyed listening to how I share my stories with how I've learned these recipes, and just the farmers that I get to meet. I mean, working with Silverbrook is a pleasure because they totally have integrity as to how they produce their products. You might go to farms and they might be strictly organic. You may go to farms and they practice the methods of organic, and then you have what they call IPM farms, which is integrated pest management. They also have integrity as far as how they produce their produce, vegetables, their fruit, and their orchards. Every farmer is working harder to bring a better food profile to your table with flavor and original taste. We have a lot of grades of fruits and vegetables that are kind of different. It's not, you know, kale has many variations today, so doesn't Swiss chard, as does garlic, as does an onion. Many things have reinvented themselves. We are trying to keep up with it all. We have to keep up with how we get to feed our family. Time is of the essence. The only chance you have of preserving and being able to produce foods of integrity for your family table is to take a look at your pantry, create a pantry. You know, people see my shows or they take my cooking classes and they say, you know, Mrs. Galino, I now have a pantry. It's small, but I have a pantry. Or I have listened and have done one tip and it works and it helps. And you build on that. You cannot do all of this in one big leap. You have to do it in little steps, just as we all learn to walk. So I welcome you to make these changes. Enjoy summer, eat well, and just taste your food. See ya. Thank you.